how long he stays is longer than we were planning on staying. We have to be committed to go where he goes, to stay where he stays. And we have to recognize that sometimes the Lord calls us to places or positions for a season to get us in position for the next step, to teach us something that we're going to need in that next season. It's also important to recognize that what he's doing this time, how he's moving this time, may look different than it did before. If we're not willing to let go and trust him and get too caught up in how he moved last time, we might miss what he's doing this time around. Again, our eyes have to be on him every step of the way. If today he gives us a city and tomorrow he tells us to leave it all, we have to trust that he knows what he's doing, because he does. And we tend to focus on what's being asked of us to sacrifice. We tend to focus on that instead of who we're sacrificing it for. That's what we should be focusing on. Because what we don't see is if we're obedient and letting go of that city, he's got a nation ready to give us. If we let go of that nation, he's got a world he's ready to give us. He's got a bigger plan. It doesn't make sense to us at the beginning because we only see in part, but he sees in whole. I think part of the struggle with letting go of certain seasons is that we tend to want that instant gratification to know, okay, my work here is done. Things are going as they should. It's time to move on. And we don't always see that, because sometimes he calls us to a place to seed and water and then calls us somewhere else for someone else to harvest. So we don't always see the fruit for what he's led us to do. But we can't get caught up in what he's having us do versus what he's having someone else do. Because if we do, we might jeopardize the whole crop. We have to stay focused on what he's leading us to do and where he's leading us to go. Because the important part isn't who's part of the harvesting. The important part is that there's a harvest and that we're all contributing towards that in whatever way the Lord's called us to. Recently, the Lord did some refining in me. That's always fun. Usually not. To get me back in focus. He was asking me to let go of some things that he established in my life. And this was hard for me because, one, change is hard, almost always. And two, I knew that God put these things in my life for a reason. So being asked to let go of them abruptly had me questioning, is this new direction, is this really from God? Because I knew he put this in my life, so is this really from God? So it caused me to pause and question. And then three, pride. I invested a lot of time and hard work. I was proud of what I accomplished. And so to be asked to abruptly let it go and lay it down was hard. But you know what happened once I finally made that decision? In a sense, the Lord said, thank you. Now go ahead and pick that back up. I want you to hold on to it for a little while. He just needed to know I was willing to lay it down, that it wasn't taking priority over him. He's not always asking us to give up things. Sometimes he just needs to know that they're not taking priority over him, that they aren't more important to him. He just needs to know that we're willing to do that. And I was immediately reminded of Abraham and Isaac. Isaac was the fulfillment of a promise the Lord had given to Abraham. He promised to multiply him, to make him the father of many nations. And Abraham held on to that promise through centuries of infertility. And finally, Isaac is born. The Lord had done what he had promised, and life was good. And then we get to Genesis 22. I'm going to read that starting in verse 1, I believe. Now it came to pass after these things that God tested Abraham and said to him, Abraham? And he said, here I am. Then he said, take now your son, your only son, Isaac, whom you love, and go to the land of Moriah and offer him there as a burnt offering on one of the mountains of which I should tell you. So Abraham rose early in the morning and saddled his donkey and took 2 of his young men with him and Isaac his son, and he split the wood for the burnt offering and arose and went to the place of which God had told him. Then on the 3rd day, Abraham lifted his eyes and saw the place afar off. And Abraham said to his young men, stay here with the donkey. The lad and I will go yonder and worship, and we will come back to you. So Abraham took the wood of the burnt offering and laid it on Isaac his son. And he took the fire in his hand and a knife, and 2 of them went together. But Isaac spoke to Abraham, his father, and said, my father. And he said, here I am, my son. And he said, look, the fire and the wood, but where is the lamb for the burnt offering? And Abraham said, my son, God will provide for himself the lamb for a burnt offering. So the two of them went together, and they came to the place of which God had told him. And Abraham built an altar there and placed the wood in order. And he bound Isaac, his son, and laid him on the altar upon the wood. And Abraham stretched out his hand and took a knife to slay his son. But the angel of the Lord called to him from heaven and said, Abraham, Abraham. So he said, Here I am. He said, Do not lay your hand on the lad, or do anything to him, for now I know that you fear God, since you have not withheld your son, your only son, from me. Then Abraham lifted his eyes and looked, and there behind him was a ram caught in the thicket by its horns. So Abraham went and took the ram and offered it for a burnt offering instead of his son. And Abraham called the name of that place, The Lord Will Provide. As it is said to this day, In the mount of the Lord it shall be provided. And the angel of the Lord called to Abraham the second time out of the heaven and said, By myself I have sworn, says the Lord, because you have done this thing, and have not withheld your son, your only son. Blessing I will bless you, and multiplying I will multiply your descendants, as the stars of heaven and as the sand which is on the seashore. And your descendants shall possess the gate of their enemies. In your seed all the nations of the earth shall be blessed, because you have obeyed my voice. So Abraham returned to his young men. This test was more about the condition of Abraham's heart, the willingness of him to lay it all down for Christ. That's really what God's looking at in us. He's looking at the condition of our heart. He's not looking at necessarily the works we're doing or the places he's put us in. He's looking at the condition of our hearts and our willingness to turn on a dime, to go where he tells us to go, to trust his every word, even if it doesn't make sense for us. Because I'm sure it couldn't have made sense for Abraham to be asked to offer up his son that he had prayed so fervently for, that he miraculously got. It couldn't have made sense to him. So God's looking at the condition of our heart and our ability to trust in him. Our willingness to forsake all, to surrender all for him, to see his kingdom come and his will be done here on earth. That recent journey the Lord took me on, it helped me get my mind back in focus on what matters, on how I need to prioritize my time. It's important to stay focused on what he's asking us to do, and to follow his guidance and his promptings, even when it doesn't make sense to us, even when we think it doesn't make sense for our family. Because we don't see the plan he's orchestrating behind the scenes. Like the verse said, God will provide. He will provide. We don't see that plan up front. We might not see that part of his plan in having us do a certain thing is in the long run is going to lead to drawing a family member into him, or to leading somebody into deliverance. We might not see that. It might not make sense at the beginning, but he's got a plan and a purpose behind it. His plans are always for good. And we save ourselves a lot of heartache and a lot of stress when we take the burden of our lives and trying to run everything, trying to figure out everything, and place it on his shoulders and fully trust him that he's going to direct us where we need to go. It takes a lot of stress off us when we say, okay, Lord, this is all I have, but it's yours.